Welcome children. Today we will be discussing 15th chapter of your science textbook, that is improvement in food resources. We already had 4 sessions on this chapter. Today is our 5th session of this chapter. So before starting this chapter, let us revise what we have done till now in this chapter. So in our previous sessions, we studied about various types of food resources and types of crops. We also studied about environmental factors affecting the crop and improvement in crop yields by different ways. We also learnt about crop variety improvement and crop production improvement, and in our previous session we studied about crop protection management till wheat, pest control and plant disease control. In today's session we will study about storage of grain. Children, 8th standard you already studied about granaries and silos. In 9th standard, in this chapter, we will study about the various types of factor which result in loss of grain during storage of grains. So let us begin our session with the introduction. Indian farmers incur rupees 92,651 crore per year in post-harvest losses, the primary cause of which are poor storage and transportation facilities. This means every year farmers lose around rupees 63,000 crore for not being able to sell their produces for which they have already made investments. It is estimated that in the tropics, each year between 25 to 40% of stored agricultural products is lost because of inadequate farm and village level storage. So children, storage is very important in case of getting good amount of money from agriculture. So there are two factors which are responsible for losses during storage. These factors are biotic factors and abiotic factors. You have already studied about these terms biotic and abiotic in your previous classes, where you have studied that biotic is related to all the life forms which can be in the form of human being, animal, bacteria, viruses, etc. All living forms are included in biotic factors, whereas all non-living forms are included in abiotic factors. So let us study about the biotic factors in grain storage. Biotic factors can be described as any living component that affects another organism or shapes the ecosystem. In a storage ecosystem, several biotic and abiotic factors interact to cause damages to the stored grains. Biotic factors are so many. These can be insects, rodents, fungi, mites, and abiotic factors are inappropriate temperature, lack of oxygen, moisture, which can cause degradation or can decrease the quality of seed grain. The insects, mites, and the microorganisms that attack stored grains and the stored grain itself constitute the biotic factor of the storage system. So let us discuss about all the factors which are included in biotic system. So let us begin with insects, because there is a great variety of insects which causes harm to our stored grain. So many grain insects, preferably, they eat out grain embryos and reduces the protein content of the food grain, which lowers the percentage of seed germination. If the seed is already bored by or damaged by any insect, the seed will not be able to germinate very well. The optimum temperature for most insect species ranges between 25 to 32 degrees Celsius. At temperatures below 14 degrees Celsius and above 42 degrees Celsius, the rate of development is reduced. Most storage pests will die at the temperature below 5 degrees Celsius, which is very cool, and above 45 degrees Celsius, which is very high temperature, very hot temperature. So in this slide you can see various type of insect pests which attacks the grain, stored grain, and result in damage to the seed grains which are stored. These can be weevils, granary weevils, saw-toothed grain weevil, and red floor beetle. It can be cabinet beetle, it can be grain borer, it can be rice weevil, and it can be meal moth, it can be cattle, and there are various other types of insect which can damage the grain and can result in loss of quality of grains which are stored. Now another group is of rodents which mainly include rats in it. Rats and mice have been estimated to damage 3 to 5% of the world cereal crop in common. Rodents prefer to feed mainly on the embryo and causes damage to the nutritional value and germination ability of the seed. Contaminations with bacterial pathogens such as Salmonella, E. coli, and Bacillus can occur. This may occur during harvesting, but more often it is result of poor hygiene in the road and in the vehicle through which it is getting transferred, and through rail compartments through which it is getting transported, or poor pest control during storage process. Now let us discuss about another biotic factor, that are mites. Mites are very small in size. It can be less than 1 mm in size, and these are arthropods, and these occur in grains both in tropical and temperate regions. The moisture content of the grain is the critical factor for their survival. If moisture content is there, that means the mites can very easily grow in that grain. If moisture content is not there, if grain is very dried or not having any kind of moisture in it, in that condition these mites will have difficulty in growing there. Mites multiply rapidly in damp and moldy grains at low temperature. So when the temperature is high, these mites will not be able to grow in the grains. Now let us discuss about a very common biotic factor which causes loss to the grains. You all must have seen these birds in your surrounding. Losses result from direct feeding and from contamination of their dropping and feathers. Their activity starts immediately after harvest, during threshing and drying, and during storage, particularly in bag storage in developing countries. Not only this, when sometimes the crop is in the field, that time also some of the birds like parrot etc. feed on the fruit, which causes loss in the productivity of that crop on which they are feeding. The birds also have a role in bringing grain insects and microflora into the grain stores. How? Through their beak, through their feathers. In their feather there are so many microorganisms which can be transferred from their body to the stored grain and can result in damage to that grain. Major pests are the pigeons, and the scientific name of pigeon is Columbia livia. Feed on the spoilage. These pigeons feed on the spillage, and the sparrow, which is also known as Passer domesticus, also feed on these grain and can result in damage of grain. Other opportunistic grain feeders such as parrots, doves, and the weavers are of local importance, and these also result in loss of grains up to certain level. Now let us discuss about abiotic factors which result in loss of grains. There are various abiotic factors which are associated with damage of food grains. These can be temperature, moisture, humidity, and material of the container in which it is getting transferred. There are many more other types of abiotic factors, but here we have taken only 4. So let us discuss these main type of abiotic factor. Temperature. If food is stored at lower temperature, then enzymes, insect, and the other microorganisms which spoil the food become very less active. We all know we keep our vegetables in refrigerator so that it will not get spoiled. And spoilage is what scientifically? Activity of microorganisms in it. So if something is kept at a very low temperature, microorganisms activity will not take place. In the same way, here also, if we will store the food grains at a low temperature, microorganisms will not grow there, and these will not result in damage into that grains. So the damage to the stored food is decreased. And the second abiotic factor which we have taken here is moisture. For safe storage of grain, it is essential that the moisture in the food grain should not be more than 14% by weight. Children, you all know that when your mother stores grains in the kitchen, she keeps it in sun for some time so that the moisture content which is present in it will be lost from there. If the moisture is not there, there are very less chances of spoilage of that grain. And the third factor which is taken here is humidity. Growth of molds and fungi in food grains takes place due to humidity in air. If humidity is less, then the chances of growth of these microorganisms will be very less. But if the humidity is very high in the atmosphere, these microorganisms can grow very easily. That is the reason that during rainy season, most of the things which are eatable spoils very fast. The last factor which we have taken here is material of container in which these grains are stored. Food grains should not be stored in lead containers because lead is a toxic metal. Not only lead, there are many other types of metals which are toxic. So before storing our grains, we should check it that the material which is used in making that container should not be toxic. Children, now we will discuss about the other factors or other things through which we can control this loss which can be caused by biotic and abiotic factors. So these factors can be controlled by proper treatment and by systematic management of warehouses. Children, you already know what are these warehouses. Warehouses are the place where the grains are stored systematically and scientifically. Preventive and control measures are used before grains are stored for future use. These preventive measures can be complete drying of grains, no presence of moisture in the grain, etc. They include strict cleaning of the produce before storage, proper drying of the produce, first into the sunlight and then in shade. Fumigation process by using some of the chemicals, and by this fumigation we are able to kill some of the pests which are already present in the grains. So now let us wrap up this session. In this session we studied about importance of proper storage of food grains, biotic and abiotic factors which affect the grain, and different types of damage that can occur in grains, and we also learned about the ways by which these losses can be minimized. Now there are some questions for you children. You have to note down the question and then you have to write the answers of these questions in your rough notebook. And the first question is, why it is important to store grains properly? Second question is, what are various biotic factors that causes loss in grain? And the last question is, name different abiotic factors that affect storage of grains. Children, hope you all will be able to write all the answers correctly. Thank you.